I've always made fun of journalists and bloggers throughout this channel, but I gotta be fair to them. They do get access to the latest information around the industry. And even then, that's not gonna be a benefit to them for long. Tech journalists who discuss about computer hardwares, for example, are able to get review samples from manufacturers. YouTube reviewers are also able to get review copies of video games or many other products out there. Independent bloggers are also able to gain information through merely looking at the social media of top industry influencers. You know what? I'll take that back. Journalists are getting more and more redundant as time went on. Thanks to the growing mass of social media, a lot of information being shared on the internet are going to be information that most people are able to access directly anyway. And even if they're not immediately accessible to the general consumers, like upcoming unreleased products, many developers and manufacturers put more confidence in the hands of YouTubers rather than journalists in reviewing their products, because many consumers also put more confidence on YouTubers rather than journalists in reviews. Thanks to their job getting more and more redundant, we recently see quite a lot of layoffs on many journalistic outlets. BuzzFeed, for example, cuts off around 15% of its workforce, resulting in the job loss of around thousands of people globally. Verizon's media group, which consists of AOL, Yahoo, and Huffington Post, will lay off 7% of its staff, which includes the entire HuffPost opinion and health sections. Which is quite interesting considering that Huffington Post are usually the ones making the hot takes. I'm actually still surprised that Yahoo even still exists. And ever since then, quite a lot of journalists are desperate for work and asking people if they're hiring. Considering that these people work at websites such as BuzzFeed and Huffington Post, which are notorious for their biases and clickbaits, it's very difficult for the average netizens to feel sympathy for these verified blue checkmark journalists losing their jobs. Who is really at fault here? Well, I personally would blame the business model of a lot of these outlets for basing their entire revenue from generating clickbaits and outrage through fake news. It's a business model that is very common in a lot of these news outlets, and it's working for a short while, I suppose, but it isn't going to be sustainable for the long run. A lot of these outlets really need to build a loyal viewer base that would consistently consume the content they produce, and you can't always do that through clickbait outrage. Ever since the layoffs, there's a recent hoopla that is happening among social media, with journalists being told by the netizens that they should learn to code. A not so terrible advice if you ask me. There are so many tutorials out there that will teach you how to code and build softwares for free. It's not a terrible advice, especially if you lost your job and you need to build up skills that are actually needed and relevant in this day and age. I would personally extend that to anything else other than coding, to be honest. I wouldn't be able to have all the average video editing and graphical editing skills if it weren't for me learning through it on the internet. Hell, the way I speak and the English language in general is something that I learned on the internet. It can be incredibly beneficial for you to do so. You're able to get a lot of very useful and productive skills on the internet, and coding is just one of those examples. Accessing the internet is the easiest thing that anyone can do. In fact, you are doing it right now as you're watching this video or listening to it, depending on how you roll with YouTube videos. And while the internet is filled with a bunch of garbage, it is also filled with a lot of very valuable information that can help you to gain skills for future jobs. The only thing that is left at this moment is for you to take the initiative on bettering yourselves and improving the skills in whatever departments that you're interested in. So when people are telling journalists that they should learn to code, I don't really see anything wrong with it. It's a genuine advice that I would say to pretty much anyone really, especially those who don't have a job. And I don't just limit that to coding. I would personally extend that to any activity that would yield a productive result and can be useful to society, and most importantly, can get you paid. Coding is just one of them. But a lot of these journalists who are being laid off by their outlets, who are using horrendous business practices to the point where BuzzFeed has to sell kitchenwares of all things, they don't like it when they're being given genuine advice. But you know what's the most ironic part of this entire thing? Journalists are also the ones who are telling people that they should code. There was a compilation image of articles after articles with journalists telling coal miners that they should learn to code the moment these coal miners are being laid off of their work. And now they're being told exactly the same thing by the working class and the blue collars and social media, and they feel really upset about it. Just to confirm that journalists are severely lacking in empathy, even though they're the ones who tell people that they should be more empathetic. Also, isn't learn to code one of the things that journalists tell women in general to do to push their feminist agenda? Oh yeah, they did. Huffington Post, for example, just say that we need to encourage girls to learn how to code. Oh wow, that's pretty sexist for you, Huffington Post, to tell girls to do things that they're not really interested in, just for the sake of pushing your own ideology. I mean, it's not really that easy to just watch a couple of videos and download Atom or NetBeans and learn how to code. code. We are, however, going to tell women that they should code because feminism is amazing, guys. And speaking of lacking in empathy, we also do have a bunch of journalists telling people that they should go screw themselves if they tell them that they should code. One of them colorfully says that these people should swan dive into Vesuvius. A really harsh advice to give, but I have to give credits on its very colorful words. There are also others who say that they shouldn't kick people when they're down because it's a cowardly move, but these are all the same people that would kick people when they're down, especially people that they disagreed with. To see journalists who make fake news articles, clickbait outrage, and kicking people that they don't like when they're down, crying when these same people are kicking them when they're down, is such a cathartic experience for a lot of people. I struggle my hardest to be sympathetic to these journalists, but at the very moment, the only people who are legitimately sympathetic to them are their own friends on their bubbles. You can try to gain sympathy from the average netizens, but I don't think that's going to be possible. Now, I understand finding a new job is about as easy as shoving your head through your own ass, but you know what else that you can do? Be an entrepreneur and make your own job. There are so many people out there in the world who has moved on from writing on news outlets to making their own independent blogs. Tim Pool is a great example of a former journalist who builds his own YouTube channels and working really hard in producing content every day at this point. If you have the skills and talent of a journalist and you're able to provide content that the viewers demand, you'll be able to become successful independently. There are so many fake news and misinformation that needs to be called out and reported. There is a market for people who are able to call out those fake news by providing their own counter information. There is also a market for coders. There is a market for comedians or entertainers on this website. But all of that will require you to be good at coding and also be funny. You can take it from me, some dork who made random YouTube videos about anime titties on the internet. I know how to exploit the market. There is a market on the internet of people who wants to talk about anime titties, especially when moral guardians want to censor them and ruin people's fun. I am also very passionate about the anime titties, and the best thing I can do is to convey a lot of the clutter and mess of information around the internet regarding the censorship of these anime titties so that people can understand what's going on. My channel isn't exactly big, but believe me when I say that I started from the bottom and I do what I can to keep this channel going. And now I got many supporters who support me through subscribing, following me on Twitter, sending me words of encouragement, making fan arts, and through donations, which you can do right down below. Shameless plug. Weird flex, I know, but to be perfectly honest, my content is pretty average and nothing really that special. Anyone can make videos with my caliber, especially with video production gadgets getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. You can build yourself from the ground up if you can't find people to hire you, but it's clear that you're not passionate about any of that. It's clear that you don't want to do the hard work because you're used to doing something simple as writing blogs on the internet when the rest of the people around the world are doing even worse things and got paid less for it. At this moment, I am going to unironically say that we live in a society. I know it's cringy as hell for me to say that, but we do. We do live in a society where people are rewarded for hard work. Not always, sure, but in general they would be. So when I say to you that you should build yourself to become better, I am legitimately trying to be helpful to you. But you refuse to take my advice and anyone's advice for it. If you give that little damn about your own life, then there's nothing else that we can do for you. People don't have to tell you to kill yourselves. You're practically doing it. Let's talk about this article for a bit because this just completely highlights how a journalist would react when they're being given a genuine advice. 4chan trolls flood laid-off HuffPost and BuzzFeed reporters with death threats. The threats are part of a coordinated campaign organized by the far-right message boards. Now, the writer Ben Collins is a journalist, and he didn't disclose the fact that he's working as a journalist. Therefore, he is the subject of his own story, and he's actively asking Twitter to do something about the people harassing him and many other journalists, telling them to learn to code at best or wishing them death threats at worst. Now, of course, death threats are not okay, but here's the thing, writer. How long are you going to complain about people sending death threats at many of these journalists before you actually recognize that these journalists need help. They need to get jobs that would actually be more productive to society rather than destroying it and causing so much division in the country. Complain about death threats all you want, but that doesn't change the fact that these journalists lose their jobs and they're unwilling to take the step to better themselves. I love that you are complaining about death threats being sent to you when blue checkmark journalists on Twitter are also the sorts of people who would wish the death of others when they disagree with them. If crying about death threats is all that you can do, I don't think you're gonna get very far in life. Eventually, you have to do something. You have to take the advice of these people and actually learn to code or learn to do anything else that are more productive than spewing garbage fake news articles. And you know what's the funniest thing here? Thanks to this article being published by NBC, they got their own contacts on Twitter, which causes people to get suspended if you just tell a bunch of journalists or news outlets that they need to learn to code. Well, would you look at that? Spamming learn to code is now an offense on Twitter. Telling journalists the same thing that they told blue-collar workers years ago to themselves, and also women, to push their feminist ideology, is now an offense on Twitter. It is one thing to get fired from your job. It is another thing when you get fired from your job doing horrendous things to so many people around the world and refusing to better yourselves when people are telling you to do so. I'm not gonna say that you should learn to code, but I will say that you have to do something for your career. And if learning to code is what it takes, then so be it. But if you refuse to do all of that, then I don't think there's any point for people to tell you to kill yourselves. You are doing exactly that. My suggestion to everyone who is sending death threats to these journalists, don't. It's redundant. They all have death wish. They don't want to take our advice to be better, get new skills, get a new job, or even make their own job. If that's how they care about their own lives, they're practically killing themselves already. So just take a seat, relax, and witness the cathartic implosion. And before we conclude this video, I want to say huge thanks to Zontar and Arkless for the donations, and very late shoutouts to the Water Guy, Profile Name, Vladimir Zontar, and Andy for the monthly patrons. You guys are fantastic.